concession stand at the high school, sorry. Roll call.
Epley?
Here.
Coles? Here. Trice? Here. Vogel?
Here.
And Weaver is excused.
I know we've all had a chance to read over the April 22 minutes, cover to cover. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes?
I'll move the minutes be approved as presented. Support.
Any discussion? Favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, public comment not related to items on the agenda. Oh, I hope not. Yeah, I know, right? I read that and I was like, oh, I really hope there's some public people there. Public hearing, what the heck does that mean?
Like when we have someone have an application.
Oh, I see. I was like, we're not ready for that, Michelle. I saw that too. I'm like, nope.
It's my standard form for agendas.
I guess number 4 was my chance to scratch that off the agenda. Okay. Business. I guess maybe if you could take over and really tell us what we're looking at here.
Sure, and Michelle, you jump in here, but I know from our last meeting, there was some to-do list things, and as Michelle always does, all the to-dos get done. And you have the number in your packet, and Trevor's here to help us along, so Michelle, please.
Yeah, so the first sheet you have, is kind of a consensus that Fleece did for, or not consensus, a spreadsheet that Fleece did for us that shows a bunch of different municipalities and communities and how they do their application fee and what additional fees could be done with their application. And then followed by that is the actual application or draft application for the city that they put together. So I think mainly the big things we need to decide on there are the application fee and how we want to structure that.
Which of these municipalities listed here are comparable to the size of Big Rapids?
Yeah, a lot of them are. Alpena would be similar.
Allegan would be similar.
Manistee.
Looks like they all go with the same 1,000, 2,500.
I was asking before the meeting started if, so if the application is 1,000, say for, up to $5 million project, but then, we're gonna have, I'm assuming they submit a plan and then hey, Trevor, can you look at our plan and make sure, and then there's a bill associated with that. Is that separate generally from the application, or, I mean,
So,
what's the escrow, I guess?
so the escrow would be in the same way that if somebody submits engineering drawings for site plan approval, you have an engineer that looks at them, right? And a lot of times that's set up through an escrow, right? You're passing the engineer's bill straight to the developer. It's the same idea. That's one way to do it. The other is to have an application fee that's gonna cover the review. When the brownfield happens, your administrative capture can pay that bill if you want it to, or it can reimburse you for your staff time. So the application fee and any other fees that you want to charge, like the additional fees section based on the total investment, that's really what you would use to cover, say, a consultant reviewing. So that's kind of the purpose of it. And the reason it's scaled based on investment is obviously the plans get a little more complicated as they get bigger. And so they take more time, and there's usually more back and forth with the developer about modifying things or finding. And often there's more meetings. So that's why, if you escrow it, if you make them escrow a certain amount to pay your consultant, then you never have an invoice really that you're covering, waiting for them, or waiting for reimbursement with. So that's why there's a couple different ways that different places do it. So it really comes down to what do you think you want to do?
I certainly don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. my opinion.
So have we done some analysis on what it costs to engineer to do something like this? You know, Fleece would do it? Is that what you're thinking, Mark?
I would expect, yeah, I would think we'd send it to Trevor, I'm guessing.
Some-
I think that was part of the original proposal, was to do that if you wanted us to.
Oh, I don't know, $300 an hour or something. I don't know what it is, but I imagine it's, you know, it's a few $1,000s, I would think, to go through a detailed plan.
Yeah.
Be,
It will be.
you know.
And then have a meeting with the developer and go back and forth.
And so, if you had the escrow, you're just gonna cover all your costs. You're gonna, right?
Right, they put a
Not-
certain
not-
amount in escrow and then
You have an escrow and the fee?
you can. Sure. So for instance, like Northville Township has an application fee, right? And that's just to take an initial look at what the developer wants to do, whether or not it's something that the Brownfield Authority and the township would support as a project. And then there's the additional fee based on what the total investment in the project is, right? So what, and that's why it's scaled that way. And then City of Northville does the escrow account, as do a number of other places.
It looks like the city of Manistee, they have a higher application fee, but then they also have an escrow account, but up to only a certain limit. Is that what that?
Yeah, pretty high limit, huh?
Yeah.
That's, would be an extreme case.
Big project, yeah. I see that 20,000 on here a couple places, so, two anyway, Crawford County. I guess that's some level of a,
Some of them do it by percentage too.
But the escrow account will give you the opportunity to ask for more money if there's more time invested, is that correct?
Yeah.
As where if you ask for a fee and hope you cover your cost, you're,
Correct. Yeah, and so if you're going back and forth with a developer and you make comments and edits and they make half of them, then you gotta keep going back because they're not doing it properly, it just eats a lot of time.
I like having a fee plus the escrow. It seems to, so the application fee can be what you think is fair, you don't scare people away, you know, that's the other thing. But
Do you have application fees for other services, for other submittals?
Yeah, we're pretty low. Our planning commission, like to apply for a special use or rezoning is $225. I would consider that pretty low for most areas for application.
I don't think you can compare apples to apples. Oh,
Yeah.
that's oranges and apples on that one, yeah.
So you set the escrow based on how big the project is?
Typically, yeah. And the thing is, you can set the escrow fairly low, and if everything goes smoothly, it'll be enough, but if there's issues and problems, then hey, you gotta refund the escrow. And it just prevents you from having to come out of pocket.
I'm just thinking about the theater project and, you know, going to Jordan and say, we want 10 grand to put in this escrow account, and he'll, you know, balk and
Yeah.
squawk.
Yeah, I don't know that we wanna
I
do
think
that.
that's a fair
I think
analysis.
that's what I'm looking at the first project, whether you're gonna have that little bit of.
Do you know who his consultant is that's writing his Brownfield?
He initially referred to you when I asked him about that.
He said police, and we thought, oh,
Yeah, so I don't know where he's at on that.
So some Brownfield authorities have their consultant write their Brownfield plans, they don't have the developer hire a consultant. There's not a lot, Kalamazoo usually does that. So there's different ways to structure it. Most developers that have done this before are gonna come with their own consultant. So it's unusual that somebody would come to you. The theater is a good example, right? He's never done a project like this. So he's coming to you saying, I wanna do this, I wanna look at it, but he doesn't have a consultant.
Or a clue.
Right. Most other developers are gonna have their own consultant.
Right, Alan Edwin being our other,
Of their own, not,
right,
And I know all that.
yeah. So is there flexibility in that circumstance of, you know, within this? I was just looking at section 4.0 and trying to decide whether or not there's some discretion between sort of your local, you know, first-time developer compared to some national firm kind of thing that just,
Sure, I mean, it's your program, it's a local program, so you can do whatever you want.
so this board could set the escrow amount, could set the fees,
Or could say, you have the option to have our consultant write your plan for you, right? I mean, that would be the alternative.
and then just be reimbursed through the
tip.
capture. How that you'd handle that.
And it wouldn't have to come out of,
that
it wouldn't have to come out of your administrative capture, because you can line item the Brownfield plan and the 381 work plan, which are the two Brownfield documents. Those have a statutory limit of 30,000 for those two. But those can be line itemed in the fifth table, they don't have to come out of your.
When you look at section 4.0, it talks about the developer is responsible for payment of all invoices, legal and professional fees associated with the preparation of Brownfield plan, any amendments to that plan, the reimbursement agreement, and the review and tracking of eligible.
Where are you, Mark?
Where are you talking about?
The last, second to
Yeah.
last page.
Yeah, it's just the section,
Anyway,
the section, on this application, where it's highlighted, it has the, I'm sorry, 1,225,000.
Okay, I got
Then it goes to section 4.0, and that's where I was like, well, what's that say? And I flipped to almost the very last page, and that's where it talks about what the escrow would have in it, or how you would come up with an estimate, I guess. Just trying to say, like, if the developer walks in here, how much are we telling them they need in escrow? We don't know until this board gets together and studies things, or Michelle and I come up with some analysis of it, or.
They'd have to approve it.
someone has to hold the hand and, you know, that's, you guys will have that figured out. I think it's wise to have the escrow and the fee.
So I'm reviewing a project with a developer for the city of Kentwood. And I've had 3 meetings with the city of Kentwood where they've come up with a list of questions, gone to the developer, got answers. Then we had another meeting to go over those. And I probably have about 20 hours into that project. To give you some idea, I bill at $200 an hour.
How many units?
167.
He told us that they were in that process.
There's a section of it that's all rental, and then there's a whole bunch of it that's for sale. But they're also putting in almost a mile of city street, extending a street for the city. So that's
They'll be doing
infrastructure.
all that for us too.
Sounds very similar.
Only
Size is bigger, yeah.
Homes
Yeah.
instead of 160 or.
That's a good example of about 40,000, or about 4,000
Yeah,
is what you have in it.
yeah. And we're almost at the point where it's in its final form.
Okay, well, that helps.
That helps us know.
Yeah.
It's a little smaller.
Like if you started at 5, it would probably cover you for pretty much most projects. And then you could, if it wasn't for whatever reason, you could always go back to the developer and say, hey, you're burning through time.
For Alan Edwin, if that one comes up this summer, which I think it'll be.
That's July, yeah.
We're busy right now with you, probably in the other one, but he's thought in July we might be meeting. But the theater we're hoping is way sooner. I hope.
I guess I come at it from like, you know, what do we say when the person walks through the door or is coming in here? Are we telling them, maybe we should just state the number of 4 or 5,000 in
So
escrow?
$1,000 application fee,
$1,000
5,000 escrow. That one's done.
I kinda like that better than, kinda trying to analyze things and, well, we won't meet ours is done, this is easy, and then you're,
Tell them the facts.
yeah, maybe if we set it at a specific number and.
And my guess is the first couple plans that you see, you're gonna have a lot of questions about.
Sure.
how it works.
Okay, so your goal for us today to set this in stone, voting on it, more discussion on this, application fee and the escrow. Is that our goals today? One of our goals, right, Michelle?
Of our goals.
Okay. Maybe if we go through it like piece by piece, as far as the first one with the application fee, does anybody see a problem with the numbers that are set in front of us?
Numbers seem reasonable.
And as far as the escrow fee, the numbers you just threw out, I'm sorry.
I just said 5,000, Emily, based on his analysis that he has 4,000 in each one right now. That was the number I threw out, was that.
How is the verbiage for that though? If we're gonna, we could say, well, you don't have to, like with the theater guy, I mean, so is it, here's your application fee and are we saying possible, you possibly have to have this, 5,000, or, cause it's kinda up to us, right? Or you
So
just have to say it
I'm
has
not
to
sure
be
how
for
you would
everyone.
structure that as discretionary.
Yep.
Or if the escrow could be waived for certain types of projects, I don't know.
Or you said something about the escrow being waived if we have our consultant write the plan versus their consultant.
That would be another way to do it, yeah.
He's still gonna charge, you still need some escrow. Who pays it?
Well,
I should
in that case.
Then we get it
you
back
would
in
be-
the TIF.
In that case, you'd be getting reimbursed as the TIF was generated.
I don't like that one as well.
No, because if something happens and the project doesn't happen.
You got it.
There's no tax increment and you're still stuck.
Stuck, and so,
That's why I would tell you not to bond for a project, right? Same way.
If you list it at 5,000, there is a potential, if it doesn't go through, you can reimburse the money. It's not used.
Oh, yeah, from the escrow?
I mean, it's
your money, it's their money.
Yeah. The other option would be to do a direct pass-through, right, to the developer. I would give you an invoice, you would turn around and give it to them.
Okay.
Then I gotta collect from them. And I don't then have a contract with them. So it gets weird.
Just go with the 5,000 to start with theater one, and,
No discretion of this board. I mean, it's,
oh, you guys just set it for this one.
but I mean, as far as if we're going to ask you to have it or not, it's always you have it, no matter what. I suppose if you're gonna do a 1 million, I mean, $5,000 is, I mean,
Yes.
okay. That's
He'll
understandable.
be getting his check for the parking
Drop in the
lot.
bucket.
Pay it.
What'd you say?
Drop in the bucket.
Right. If you're gonna have $1 million, 5,000. Okay, good.
Surprised what they fight over.
sure of it.
Yeah.
Better to amend and adjust accordingly in the future than to not collect what you need when you need it.
Okay, so as far as the first checkbox in our application fee highlightation here, highlightedness here, I think we're all in agreement of the fees for the dollar amounts, and as far as the escrow, 5,000. Get yourself rolling. Does anybody have any more discussion on that number, or feel that that's enough? Okay. Motion, vote on, do you want to vote on that together,
I'll make that motion.
all in one package, set fee schedule and
The
the
fee schedule and escrow amount, 5,000.
I'll second it.
any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. We did something. I feel like we did something. I like it.
Mark, did we city commissioners appoint this board? Did we vote on that?
Yes.
I don't remember sometimes.
Are you trying to kick me off? Cause I'm ready.
She's like, day.
I know, right? I can go home and have some snacks. This is great. I know, right? All right, Michelle, what's the next thing you want us to do?
Bylaws very specifically who appoints the board.
Okay,
I hunted for it.
Bylaws, yeah, the bylaws are next.
Right. Maybe I just didn't see it, but I read for it.
I think it's not in there because it's in the charter. I think the charter spells out who appoints. That's where all our other boards are.
yeah, it's definitely not a charter specific
I
board,
think so.
but maybe what you're saying, Michelle, is the charter specifies that for all official city boards or something. I'd have to look at that.
It does. 'Cause that's,
So as long as,
Yeah, you definitely appointed this, but it's a good point to bring up. So
just make sure it's
clear.
somewhere, Michelle.
okay.
You want us to do?
So these documents are a little generic. They're typical of the kind of documents that other authorities have.
The application?
The application, the policies and procedures, and there's places where we've highlighted things that are kind of open for discussion, like how do you want to structure your program versus some things that kind of need to be in there. These are the types of things that you want to make sure you have covered. And for the most part, this language would be fine if you wanted to adopt it this way. Otherwise, if you think you want to word it differently.
What are the highlighted areas? Those are the things you really want us to pay attention to and read over or change or?
Well, if you're looking at the bylaws, the purpose really, that's kind of a statutory purpose. That is the purpose of a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. So that one you probably don't want to change. The rest of it is,
It's written by the state of Michigan.
well, it's basically what the statute says the purpose of a Brownfield Authority is, yeah. Not written the way a lawyer would. In terms of like Article 3, which is the directors, this is pretty common. These are the types of things that other authorities have run into issues like how do you remove somebody from a board if they don't show up for meetings for a certain number of meetings or that kind of thing. If you don't have a policy on how you get rid of somebody, then it's how do you make that decision, right? So this kind of just lays out those kind of things.
What about, I mean, this says 5 persons and not more than 9, and we just voted with 4.
Well, you have
It's a meeting.
a quorum,
Okay.
and the statute allows for that number of.
What is the unless and EDC, ODA, or LDFA board is appointed, it says,
So
unless,
I don't know what any of those are.
yeah, I don't know what they are, I don't.
So EDC is an economic development corporation. A TIFA district is like a DDA. LDFA is a local development finance authority. These are other boards that you might have in a city that you can say they're gonna double as our Brownfield Authority.
Oh, I see.
Right, and so in that case, the number of people on the board would be dictated by whatever that authority has as limits.
Right,
In this case, you have a separate Brownfield Authority, so.
thanks.
So do they need to approve these bylaws then? Have they ever done that, or are these set already?
They haven't been approved yet.
Not even before?
These are not the ones that were done previously. These are new ones.
And I don't think city council does anything with these. This is this authority saying these are our.
study all these is not right down my alley. but
Yeah, so
Maybe it's your alley.
I don't know if you wanna approve them tonight, or if you wanna read through them and make sure they're how you want them to be.
How long have they had them, Michelle? How long were you sending them out?
They were sent Friday.
Yeah, only the end of
With
last
here.
week.
That's not enough time.
Right.
I know when I was looking at it online, it was really tiny, but I was on my phone, not a computer, so that's my fault.
So Michelle, when Sue Glatz was on the Brownfield Authority, where are their bylaws? And do they, you can just dump those and start a new one?
I found them in paper form, and I could not find them digitally.
What does that mean? I'm not sure they were ever adopted. That was,
You don't think so, Mark?
I went to, yeah, I don't
They
know.
didn't do a project?
No, there was never a project.
We had barely had meetings. I mean, it was, we've already gotten as far or further than we had before, yeah. We'll come back to the bylaws, and I think all of you probably know bylaws aren't a thing you frequent very often. You go to them and sort of, not that they're not important, it's just, we can always revisit bylaws. We're not gonna attempt to try to pass them tonight, right? So
Can I ask some questions, though?
please do.
Article 6, other financial affairs, question, will the cost of an audit be charged to the authority? Can that part of the cost be part of how can we, will the city come to this board and say, you're gonna pay $2,000 for that audit annually? I don't know if that's what you do. The county does it that way, I found out. Is that, what's your thought? Is there gonna be an expense to the board? Or,
Well, you want my Steve Sobers answer to that one?
I just want an answer. I'm just thinking about it.
I think it would be wholly dependent on how much money this group operated in. If you're at this moment in time, I cannot imagine coming to the Brownfield Authority and saying, "Well, come, you guys pass the hat." There's nothing there.
Zero, right?
But if you went to a point in time 10 years from now where there was $1 million in the bank, I would expect that the city would ask the Brownfield Authority to potentially pay for their audit. That'd be my guess. I don't, I just,
Brownfield Authority recoup that cost from the applicant.
That wouldn't come from the applicant, that would come out of your administrative fees that you're capturing on each project.
We can have an operator budget.
Okay.
So the authority, the authority in aggregate can capture up to $125,000 a year from up to 5 plans. Once you get more than 5, then it goes up to, I think, 150,000. So depending on how many active plans you have, the amount of money that you can capture in aggregate from all of them goes up. You're probably not gonna capture 125,000 a year from one project, right?
I would think that would.
Typically you're in the range of between 5 and 10% of the available tax increment is captured by the authority for administrative costs every year.
And isn't that money used to sweeten the pot for developers? Is that
Well, no, it's staff time,
staff time?
yeah, or other, if you're paying a consultant, it can come out of those fees, or that capture rather.
that's different than the LDFA.
Yes, that's different from the,
What do we call it? You know what I'm saying?
yes, you're talking about the revolving loan fund.
Yeah, that's different than
That's
that.
different.
That's what you use to buy property or
Correct.
put in a, sidewalk or,
Make a
that's what I think Tim's.
grant or a loan to a developer from your.
Trying to understand.
Yeah, I know, it's a good question.
That's what you capture typically at the end of a brownfield plan. Once the developer in the plan has been reimbursed, you can continue to capture for up to 5 years. And that goes into your brownfield fund.
It's not that we're probably at any moment in time in the near future gonna have a lot of money, but brownfield authorities can. That was my only point.
That's why, when my other daughter's husband said, how much do you have in your Brownfield Authority? Oh, zero.
Well, I remember you saying that, and I'm thinking, well, how do you get that money?
That's how they get it. They keep doing it after the completion.
Correct.
Do you wanna wait, you want us to wait till the next meeting? Discuss this, or do you want us to have something to you before the next meeting?
Well, I would say if you have questions,
Before the next meeting?
get them to me before the next meeting, because if I don't know them, Trevor's gonna get them.
So the last of the documents is policy and procedure. This is more what determines how as an authority you're gonna, right, so the bylaws are more how are you gonna structure your board, right? Policies and procedures are how are you going to run your program, what types of things do you want to provide an incentive for, what don't you, are you gonna approve interest, are you not gonna approve interest? The interest is something that the developer can charge based on the amount of, based on what the Brownfield has approved as a total reimbursement. Obviously that, it might be a 10-year plan, it might take 10 years for them to get fully reimbursed. They're allowed to ask for interest over that time period. And sometimes that interest can be half what their total approved amount is. It can be huge. So I think the project I was referencing in Kentwood, I can tell you what it is.
Is that, are those the plans? Do you see those plans? The plans that you work with are, is that interest component in most of them, or
Well,
what works the
Kentwood's
best?
policy is they will not reimburse interest.
Okay.
They're making an exception on this project because they're getting an $8 million road bill. So they're saying, okay, we're gonna allow you to capture interest on all the public infrastructure. Because we're telling you, we're asking you to put it in and you've agreed to put it in. So the developer's paying for all that. They're putting in all the water, sewer, to city specifications, and they're upsizing it so that downstream can be developed as well. So it's a pretty big investment. So they're allowing them to capture interest on that, but not on the other parts of it. Some communities allow interest and some don't. Some will cap the interest at a certain amount. So there's a calculator for interest that Eagle and MEDC put together. So you plug in all the metrics of your project and it kicks out, you can charge this much interest, and then it gets spread out over the course of the repayment.
Lost on the interest part when it comes to the TIF.
It's on the unreimbursed eligible activities. So let's say somebody comes to you and says, I want to do this Brownfield plan, and I have $1 million in Brownfield eligible activities. And you agree, yep, we're gonna pass your plan, you can capture $1 million, and let's say it's gonna take them 10 years to do it. So every year, they're gonna get $100,000 in tax increment, right? So every year, that 10 million goes to, sorry, 1 million and 100,000. So every year, so they start out with being, having $1 million to be reimbursed. Then it's 900,000, 800, right? And so on the unreimbursed portion every year, so 900, 800, they're allowed to charge up to 5% interest. So for
Also get
instance,
reimbursed.
huh?
Also get that reimbursed.
Get that reimbursed. So for instance, the one, and I don't have it here, I'd have to get into my system. I think their total reimbursement was 20 million and the interest was like So Kentwood said no.
Yeah, we had a,
And there's one on
Case
that
study.
table, Trevor.
Oh, is there?
Case study for a Brownfield plan that Trevor City did.
and they have, it jumped out at Michelle and I that it's like, oh, wow, there's some big interest numbers on here.
They can be very big, yeah, especially if it's a long time to reimburse the project.
Yeah, this is 30 years.
Yeah. And if it's gonna take 30 years to reimburse your project, it may not be the best project.
Yeah, 30 years seems like an
It's
awful.
the statutory limit. They cannot be longer than 30 years.
So I think somebody needs to make this statement, I'm gonna make it. You lay people, including the commissioners, ex-commissioner, et cetera, you really, unless you're gonna spend your life studying, won't get this really fluently out of your brain unless you study your butt off. You have to rely on the full-time paid professionals. Because if you think you can do it, go for it. I have to rely on Michelle, Mark, Brittany, Trevor. You just can't, as a layperson, fluently know this stuff. Now, Mr. Vogel was at the city and studied this, what, how many years? 40 years? But how do you feel about that? I just can't, I can't do it that quickly and I have to rely on those folks. So when you're approving bylaws and policies and procedures, if you don't trust the administration to be leading you in the right direction, you're gonna have to study a lot. Would you agree with that, Trevor, that statement? Yes. It's tough for us. And I just listened, I'm halfway, have half a brain. It just gets real confusing the longer we sit here, the worse it gets. So don't panic. But if you don't trust your administration and your paid professionals, you're gonna have a real worrisome time on the Brownfield.
Well, I think that's fair, Mayor.
I
It's
think
a
it's
lot of.
fair because I don't
it's a
get
lot
it
of
at the
It's a lot
time.
of details.
Yes.
A lot of nuance to what's included and what's not, and
We're lay people. We don't do multi-million-dollar projects and collect the interest and do this and do that. And pretty soon I just glaze over. I mean, maybe you guys don't, but I do, you know?
So there's two sections of text where we highlighted in the interest section, right? And one is that interest costs are generally not considered to be eligible activity in this policy. And that payment of interest from tax increment revenue or advances made for eligible activities will be determined by the Brownfield Authority on a case-by-case basis, based on the project financial need. So one of the things that you will probably request from developers is a pro forma. What are the sources and uses of their funds? How much of it is loans or grants, or what are their sources, right? And if they're going to the state for reimbursement, they have to provide it. So if they're gonna capture the state taxes, they have to provide it. So you can look at it on a case-by-case basis and say, well, they have a lot of eligible activities that are really need to be done. Like maybe there's $1 million in cleanup that has to be done, right? It would be reasonable to say, well, that's really a public good, they're cleaning up this property. If it's just things like, you know, they're putting in housing, so they want infrastructure for their internal roads and stuff like that, you might say, well, you'd have to do that anyway, right? So you can say, we're not gonna approve interest, we're gonna review it on a case-by-case basis based on financial need. You could say, we'll reimburse public infrastructure, we'll allow interest on public infrastructure, or you can say, we're not gonna do it at all. I kinda like the case-by-case basis, because then, I mean, you're looking at every project individually anyway. And if you're looking at a project and you determine that, hey, this is a good project, we'd like to have this project, and it needs a little help to get over the finish line, we'll approve interest for 10 years, or we'll approve 4% or 5% or 3%. You can make it a reasonable number by doing that. I would.
Well, you want this board to have the flexibility to strike a deal.
Yes.
And that's a part of striking a deal.
Correct.
Right? So, I mean, I think the case by
To
case.
blanket say no doesn't allow that as an option for you to consider, right? Well, I mean, it does, you can always change your policy. If it's in your policy that it'll be case by case, then the developer can request it, and then you can evaluate whether or not it's something you want to do.
And there's no kind of precedent that on these kind of plans, like,
No, if you're saying you're treating everyone individually on a case-by-case financial need basis, then that's what you're doing.
So basically looking to vote between these two highlighted statements.
Yeah, those are the two main ways that you want to consider interest. How you decide to do it is obviously up to you guys.
I mean, the first paragraph is definitely easier for me to read as an eye doctor. I imagine for the rest of humanity.
What I'm getting at with the comments.
I mean, I'm in agreement with case by case. I think it gives us the most flexibility.
Makes sense to me.
So,
Does, and, sorry, Emily, if I'm interrupting you. You know, I always find like the wastewater project. We're doing a big $8 million wastewater project right now, and we're meeting with the financial people, and they come back and they say, well, we have this structured for a 30-year payback. And I was like, well, we've replaced this stuff. And I mean, wastewater is a dramatic example, but
Sure.
30 years is too long.
That screw thing will fall apart.
Right, yeah, you know, if they build a sidewalk 30 years from now, it may, do you put in
Rules
here?
will change before you're done.
Yeah, do you put in here anything about, like, we don't, we limit our time, is that on here somewhere, or?
That's something that you can consider as well.
That's a case-by-case thing
Part
too?
of your case-by-case evaluation is, you might say, we're gonna limit capture to 15 years. We're not gonna allow you to go out to 30 years. Or you could look at a project and say, they're estimating reimbursement in 18 years, so we'll approve up to 20, give it a little buffer, right? Or you can, I've seen plans where they capped it at a certain number of years. The developer hit that, they weren't fully reimbursed, but too bad.
Just keeps paying the bill.
Yeah, I mean, they were done getting, whatever that developer hadn't captured in that 15 years, they just never get. So there's that's kind of a case-by-case evaluation as well. You can't set a year limit without knowing what the plan is.
Got it, that's good.
Because every plan is different.
Sure.
But you can say that you have you will consider limiting the years of capture based on the project financials.
So when Alan Edwin presents this to this group, an accountant does the financial evaluation or does Fleece?
We would probably do it based on the numbers they're providing they're gonna prepare a brownfield plan, they're gonna prepare the tax tables, the tax increment tables, and their consultant will do all that. And then what we'll do is we'll look at it and see, does it make sense? And they know what they're doing.
You can see where they're trying to finagle and put it.
They're pretty straightforward.
Are they?
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty open. I mean, they provide their tax increment tables in Excel with all the formulas. You can see exactly what they're doing. A lot of consultants won't give their Excel table out because they consider the formulas to be proprietary. They'll give you a PDF of it, and you could spot check by hand calculating. But they give you their Excel table fully with everything. And they get complicated.
We'll have Michelle do that.
you lost me at Excel.
under number 2, under your policies, you wrote a comment about, AMI. And is that something we need to talk about in the policies, or just something the board needs to take note of?
So this is one of the changes to the Brownfield statute and why you're having a residential developer come to you. So the recent amendments, and I say recent, they're a couple years old allows for a housing development to be considered a brownfield. And there's a number of activities in there that are eligible. In fact, all of the brownfield activities that are eligible on a housing development. So infrastructure, public infrastructure, site prep, demolition, everything. What is also allowed is a financing gap calculation based on if they're building attainable housing. So MISTA sets a area median income and a standard area rent, say for a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom. And if you're under 120% of AMI, you can calculate this financial gap using a formula that MISTA has developed and get reimbursed for that. And basically what it's saying is you're gonna rent this apartment for $1,000 a month, but market would be $1,600 a month. So you can capture that 600, right? To make yourself kind of whole for as long as you hold the unit at that level of income. And there's income verification that has to be done every year, and that's your obligation as the board. So
We already talked about this in the last meeting, it's hers.
you're gonna have an agreement, you're gonna have what's called a reimbursement agreement for every single brownfield plan with the developer that says, you're gonna provide, and I can give you examples of them, I can give you
I'll tell you, now I'm understanding better after your last comments about why Ellen Edwin is looking here. Our income levels are so low that they'll have tons of gap, because we don't have anybody that makes very much. So I thought, why are they coming here? Nobody's gonna buy these damn $300,000 homes.
See,
Now they're gonna rent them and they're gonna do this, what you're talking about, gap thing, and that's how it's gonna get built. Mark, you think? We've talked about why would they put 50 homes for 300,000, we don't have that many people who can afford that. They can afford the rent if they get that.
if it's rent, yes, if it's for sale, it limits the amount of tax increment available.
He hinted that there'd be a lot of rentals in there.
Yeah, and that's,
He knows our town and our people.
because rental is not a homestead exempt, it pays the 18 mils of state taxes.
Yes.
So those are them,
stressed that
those
to
are
us.
available for capture. If they're for sale, whoever buys it homesteads it, and they don't pay the 18 mils, so there's no increment on the state side to capture.
Give me to everything.
So one of the things to consider is, if they're at 100% of AMI, are you gonna allow a certain amount of interest? If they come in at 60% of AMI, right, which is really low, are you gonna allow the full 5%? So are you gonna scale what you're gonna allow for interest based on where they fall on that AMI scale? Does that make sense?
I know what you're saying, but.
Because it's 60% of AMI, at 60% of AMI, somebody making minimum wage could probably afford to rent it.
Yes.
And so that's the benefit to the community.
Sure.
Did they do any of that in Kentwood? They probably didn't.
Didn't have to, probably.
They're under 120%. So of the units they're building,
It's higher than ours.
That's true.
yeah, that basis is considerably
It
higher.
moves.
Yeah, considerably higher, that base rent that MISTA calculated.
Yeah, there you go. That's how they're getting this,
But they're only building like 40 affordable,
except if you can't get those
attainable.
sold, he told us if you.
well, at least,
Right,
they're
if you-
rented, and they will get rented.
That's
They
what.
will down there, they will.
Get sold.
They will absolutely, well, but the rest of the development is for sale. It's only like 40 of the 160 units that are rental.
Does the government determine that, or
No,
the developer?
no, the developer MISTA doesn't have a percentage of the development that has to be at that level, but only the part of it that is eligible for that financing gap calculation. So they can only calculate that on the 40 units that they're building under 120 AMI.
25 Excel sheets talking.
It's one big complicated Excel spreadsheet.
What about the whole college student that you're renting?
Oh, you mean for this next project, the big one? They claim they can get that done for us. That out,
What's that?
to disallow college rentals in that development.
There's always a catch. There's always a.
That's,
Grandma has her grandchildren there, and there's 14 of them.
And their cousins.
But then that rental wouldn't qualify for the AMI.
because
Which
it's
is what they
household
want.
income.
Oh, it's household, okay.
Yeah, it's household income. It's qualified household income.
Well, oh wait, okay.
Well, that's important, I think.
We've been talking about that for every developer who comes, because we don't want a new development that's all rentals for students. Because citizens wanna live in their neighborhood.
So in Ann Arbor, they built a couple big towers, apartment complex that were pretty much all student rentals. Those were brownfields.
Really?
They didn't, the housing TIF didn't exist at the time, so they qualified
I see.
for other ways, either contaminated or.
Old Brownfield.
Yes. So the housing gap wasn't even eligible for them. It was just reimbursed for other eligible stuff. But that's an issue, right? And you have a hard time, I think, I'm not a lawyer, but I think you would have a hard time saying you can't build it for this purpose because it comes into fair housing.
Sure.
Fall back on your zoning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to rely on other methods.
Which has its flaws, Emily and others know about. I mean, it's impossible to have that nailed down, but, you know, there's lots of neighborhoods that are, they rent them or not.
So if they come in
Sure,
and
there'll be a mixture of that.
50 units, you're talking roughly 50 units, are they all gonna be for rent? Or some gonna be for
They
sale?
didn't tell us that.
Based on whether they can get them sold, if after a certain amount of time, he said if they don't get them sold, they're gonna go up for rent.
Yeah.
Probably by the time they hang drywall.
Is that what he said?
Well, I mean, we noticed the difference in the drywall between the rental.
So they're gonna have to decide that before they build.
Oh, I'm sure they have.
Because it has to be in the brownfield plan and approved before they incur any costs.
Oh, I see.
I know they.
Before they incur any brownfield eligible costs. So they're gonna ask for site preparation, they're gonna ask for infrastructure.
Yeah, they gave,
Yeah, they're gonna ask for infrastructure, including in the internal roads they have sidewalk, lighting, gutter, sewer, water, gas, everything. Those are
End
all,
up bargaining down the number of units in the 20 acres. They wanted 75, and that's packing them in like sardines.
and the reason they probably wanted that is because the higher the density, the more tax increment is generated.
Yeah,
We got it.
So the reimbursement period gets shorter. So the return to them is faster, and then also the return to all the taxing jurisdictions comes faster.
What you need today, Michelle, I won't interrupt again. What you need?
So,
We just need to move through the policies and
And-
answer questions.
and you can, so the interest is one of those tricky ones, right? And housing has complicated. So I would read through this and then you're gonna have questions and maybe get me a list of questions and
Okay.
reconvene.
I think,
Most plans have like a housing percentage, or they just kind of deal with it case by case?
It's case by case, so I've reviewed plans that were 100%. So we approved one in Ypsilanti that was 60 units and they were all at like 60% AMI. But the developer had a ton of grants. That was paying for a lot of their development costs, and what wasn't was basically eligible to be reimbursed. But it was gonna take a long time, cause they were so low.
bigger, and it seems like probably everybody feels like this, but I feel like if something weird's gonna happen, it usually happens in Big Rapids, it seems like, but the only brownfield that was ever done here was the Lake Osceola State Bank. And I didn't, it was done through the county Brownfield Authority, so the county administrator was in charge of it. And there was some big hang up because the proposed values, estimated captures never came in the way they were supposed to. And I don't know if that was a recession thing. I guess I wasn't as into it. I know it got into some argument over who gets paid first.
Right.
Is that all spelled out in here?
That will be in your reimbursement agreement.
Okay.
And that will be reflected in so in the Brownfield plan, you have a tax increment table that lays out year by year, here's what we estimate will be available to be captured, right? And that's based on what's the initial taxable value, and then does the developer think is going to be the actual assessed taxable value? And usually, we try and work with the local assessor and say, here's what we're building, where do you think you would put it, right? What do you think the taxable value would be? And some assessors will give you a number, and some will say, I don't know till you build it and I look at it. So you have to go by what other properties in the area are assessed at. But you put an estimate of what the new taxable value will be, because the difference between those two is what can be captured. That's how the Brownfield works.
Right.
And so if that guesstimate on the new taxable value is off, then all your numbers are off.
That's what I was getting at. And if it's laid out in there that the developer gets 90% and we do 10% and then their number, their 90, what they thought it was gonna be is smaller, that doesn't mean they get to go above 90, right? It's sort of
It is what it
puzzled
is.
out in there.
Yeah, it gets calculated every year based on what the actual assessed value is. The Brownfield plan is just an estimate of what we think it's going to be. So then there's another table after the tax table called a reimbursement table. And that lays out how those incremental revenues are going to get divided. How much is gonna go to the developer, how much is gonna go to the city,
That's what I was,
the authority, who's gonna get reimbursed first, right? And developers always wanna get reimbursed first, and then you can capture whatever. So for instance, on a housing development, you might say, well, we have to put in infrastructure. As the city, we're gonna put in this infrastructure to extend our utilities to this property. Well, you can get reimbursed for doing that. So the developer's gonna say, well, we wanna get reimbursed for our activities before you do.
yeah, I knew that was coming.
And then you can say, well, no, we wanna split the increment, and you might do it at some percentage. You might say, you can have 70%, but we need 30 to cover ourselves.
That's all part of the,
And that is the negotiation that goes back and forth.
Like this lay board will just negotiate that right to death, huh?
I
It's
think
impossible.
we'll have to have a lot of help.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why for some projects, your 5,000 escrow isn't gonna be in it. And on others, it will be. So it really comes down, that's why they're so project specific. You don't know what you're gonna get, who's gonna come in with what ask.
No, it's good. Good job, Michelle and Trevor, and pulling this
Do
together.
we have to vote on policies and procedures, or next time, or what?
It's up to the board how they wanna handle it.
You want us to make amendments to the whole thing and vote on it as a whole? Or are we gonna, do we have to vote on certain sections as we go?
Oh, the policies and procedures, I think you would adopt as one document.
Okay, so we don't have to vote on changing all the single things that we, okay. Well,
You wanna jump down, so a lot of this is from the statute, right? Like, these are activities that are eligible. They're eligible because they're eligible in the statute. We're just restating it here. But local only, right? So there's local taxes, which is all the taxes up through county. And then there's the state taxes, which are the two school tax, the 6 mills and the 18 mills. if they build houses that are going to be sold, or if they're doing a development that qualifies but probably wouldn't get approved by the state, what is your policy as a board going to be? Are you willing to reimburse the full amount out of local, or are you only gonna reimburse what you would have had the state participated, like on a proportional basis? Right? So, and there's there's an example in here, right? Of,
I see what you're saying, right, so if they applied to the state, had all this extra millage, captured it, they'd get paid back way faster, and our
Well,
proportion would be smaller.
correct, so if the split was 60-40, 40% of their reimbursement would be coming from the state taxes and 60 from local. If they don't go to request from the state, are you gonna say, well, we're only gonna approve 60%, because that's all we would have paid had you gone to the state? Or, let's say they go to the state and the state says, you know what, we're not gonna support that. Are you out of the locals going to?
How often are they applying to the state? Very frequently, infrequently?
It really depends on the project. So if it's environmental activities, we'll usually go to Eagle, because if it's environmental, Eagle will approve it. If it's non-environmental, then it goes to the MEDC. And the MEDC is very particular about what projects it likes to support. Even though it's
So they're doing
taxing,
it based on
even
what,
though it's not coming out of like their pocket, it's a tax increment.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
They're doing it based on whether or not they think they can get it.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing it based on. And MEDC is much harder to get it from. And so you gotta have a
it's also
sexy
really-
project, so.
Yeah, so the project has to qualify, so it's gotta be, one that would end up going to MEDC. And what's eligible is things like site preparation, that's a non-environmental, that's eligible. Public infrastructure, so housing, they can do all their private infrastructure. On an MEDC project, it's only public infrastructure. So,
Sewer, sidewalks, road.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of times MEDC, if you're not in a core community, if you're not in the historic business district, if you're kind of on the edge of the city, MEDC might look at your project and say, that's just not one that we're going to support.
Until it goes away.
They don't fund it.
Well, they won't approve capture of the state taxes.
Of the state part.
Right, so then it would,
Percent, right?
18 mils.
The 18 mils is,
For non-homestead.
non-homestead.
It would be but there's 6 mils
state.
of state education tax that all of us pay, whether you're homestead or not.
Correct. And 3 of those mills, if you're capturing in a brownfield, have to go to the state.
Oh.
So you can only capture 3 of those because the state takes their 3, and that's what they use to fund their brownfield program.
But if they do the rentals, they could do the 18 mils.
Correct.
That's why they're gonna
They
have,
can do the 18 and half the SCT.
Just for rentals.
maybe, I can't tell, Mayor, I don't know. How did they apply, I just keep asking you about Kentwood, did they apply in Kentwood to the state?
They're going to, yes. Because it's gonna go to MISTA, it's a housing development, and MISTA will approve it.
We still approve ours too, right?
MISTA would approve yours.
That's
The difference, because MISTA will approve it, MEDC is much more particular about what projects it chooses to support.
So Mishta and Eagle are usually yeses.
I got you.
Yes.
I was throwing in MEDC. What does MEDC do again then?
So they handle all the non-environmental.
Theater kind of thing, that kind of thing?
That would,
Environmental.
yeah, so if it's the theater and they're putting in something to do with vapor, that would go to Eagle. Demolition is a non-environmental, that goes to the MEDC. So sometimes you have 2 agencies reviewing your brownfield plan, right? Because you've got environmental and non-environmental activities.
Yeah, yeah. It's important to have good consultants.
We have the Oprah. We do, it's another one. Was it Oprah?
Yeah.
Probably property rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's gonna be on the theater, the Oprah.
Oh, boy, there's a lot to soak in, you guys, as the mayor has aptly pointed out.
Well, and you are what's called a core community.
Core community versus a,
C-O-R-E.
Feelings?
Core, yeah.
what does that mean?
So, in the Oprah legislation, the state tax tribunal set a list of communities that are core communities. I don't know exactly how.
Or something, or
Yeah,
what?
it's
Well,
a
It's probably based
financial
on.
need.
It is, but Ann Arbor is a core community.
There you go. Go ahead.
Arbor.
Ann Arbor is a core. So, I mean, it's not, Grand Rapids is a core, Detroit's a core, Pontiac's a core.
Ann Arbor, it fits that.
Sure. But the MEDC non-environmental activities are only eligible in core communities. Right? So they can go to the MEDC for non-environmental because you're a core community.
How do we qualify for that? Did we apply for that?
State.
No, the state determined it and they're never gonna change the list. It was set as part of the Oprah legislation.
Oh, yeah, Oprah.
And then the Brownfield statute references that.
Jeez. You know, are these all programs that just are there to like suck money out of the world or something?
I think so.
Jeez. Trevor, there's so much stuff.
There's a lot to know.
So, what do we have? It's an hour and 15.
Yeah, it's
We're-
time.
We have an application and we have a fee. That gets us going, right? We needed that. Bylaws, policies, and procedures, we can
Prove those next time.
approve those next time. You have a case study here that's very interesting. There's 25 of these on the
We went.
Traverse City one, Grand Traverse County.
There's, Washington County has a ton on it.
Yeah, you can.
Grand Rapids does, Kalamazoo does, yeah.
Right, so it does, I thought it was a good idea to get one of these though, cause it just helps as you're actually looking at it. This
At
particular.
the end of that, you should see the tables I was talking about.
Yes, there's a whole bunch, slew of.
Normally, when we print those, we print them on 11 by 17.
Yes, right, they're tiny.
You need them magnifying.
This is for example, this is a $10 million capture, $10 million project, and it has, 2.4 million in interest. Kind of an interesting thing, but a bunch of it was to the city.
So the city was paying for some of the eligible activities, so they're getting reimbursed.
Yeah, so the city collected interest on it too.
Correct.
An interesting one, huh, Brittany? Perk you up.
Who's Otwell Mobby,
They're another consulting company.
like you guys are doing for us?
Yeah, they do environmental and brownfield.
The engineers, or what are they?
They are also engineers, yes. I think they're in Plymouth. I think.
Do we have a set meeting schedule?
Yes.
Oh, this is too much.
Well, that's the other thing, is a lot of authorities will only hold meetings on an as-needed basis. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a plan in front of you and you don't have any, say, reimbursements to developers to approve, because those reimbursement requests, when a developer does a project, they're gonna put together a request for reimbursement. They have to provide proof, invoices that they paid all these contractors whatever amount, and they'll request a reimbursement, and that would come to the board to approve payment.
We have a next date. I had a
Yeah,
kind of an
it's-
off-the-record comment.
June, July, and August.
I have one, too.
That's first. Oh, please, please.
We're
Yeah.
alive.
This huge, I call it huge, 160 homes to me is huge, in Kentwood.
Yeah.
Is there a group of you at Fleece who mull it over with each other to make sure? Or do they just use one guy, you?
So
I mean, it seems like I'd want a committee because you could really screw up and then it'd be a mess.
So I go to the meetings with the city, but I confer with Sam, and Sam and I work on this.
Sam.
Samantha's the one that made the comments in this document.
Okay.
So she,
There's just two of you who look that all over, or do you have a legal firm who's also looking to make sure it's cool, or?
no, but the corporation council, the city's attorney does look at these as well, and they look more at the reimbursement agreement too. They look at, because that's the legal document at the end that after the brownfield's approved, they enter into an agreement with the developer, like, here's how you're going to be reimbursed.
So would Micah Myers have a guy in their firm who's an expert to work with
Probably,
you?
most law firms have somebody who knows this. If not, I can give you the name of 3.
You know where I'm going.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
We're gonna
absolutely.
cover our behinder really good here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was still hung up on the, we're gonna go out and income verify every one of these houses every year.
No, so
That one just about done. I thought, how you do that?
Greg Pepper's.
There are firms that actually do that. You can use your administrative capture to pay that, and they're only like $300 or $400 a year to look at that.
Get on the computer.
Providing the developer gives them all the metrics. So the developer is gonna have all this information. So part of your reimbursement agreement is every year you have to give us the financial information in order to verify that you're in compliance. Because if they're not in compliance, then they don't get reimbursement.
That sounds
don't
better.
get-
We're not knocking on the door saying, how much did you make this
They
year?
have to provide it to you in order to get.
Consequence is not getting the money they want.
Yeah, right?
The mayor would be excellent at that job.
I think this is way more complicated than I ever dreamed, hey, Timmy?
It's
I mean, this sounds way too complicated.
So I'm on Washington County's authority, and what we're going to do is the Ann Arbor Housing Commission has a consultant that does this for them. Because the Housing Commission handles all their Section 8 housing, and they own a lot of housing that they hold at certain AMI levels. And so they have to verify for the state that they're in compliance with whatever they have to be. And so they have a consultant that does that verification for them every year. We're just gonna use their same one.
If they have you on their Brownfield authority, where's our you?
Here's that, she's got it.
3 got it.
You know, like at Christmas time.
We're a board of 9 and 3 of us are how I feel about it.
Perfect. We're waiting for ours to drop out.
How many will they have rolling at a time at Washington Oz, Brownfield? Like 10 going at once, or?
16 active plans right now.
Wow.
So we can capture like
Assistants.
290,000 a year in admin.
See,
Like, yeah, Grand Traverse County must be in that kind of,
Yeah, they had a
Yeah,
bunch of
metrics.
plans on there.
yeah,
It
there was a
like-
whole slew of them on there, so.
But we only have a certain amount of actual administrative costs. It's the county staff person that runs our authority for us, kind of like what you're doing. And so he organizes all the meetings, he puts the packets together, he sends out all the correspondence. He tends to look at plans first before they even come to us. Once his costs are covered, we take the rest of our admin capture and we give it out as grants for projects.
Oh,
we'll-
to developers, not for like nonprofits like we do around here.
Well, we do that too. So one of our priorities, one of our priorities is to help nonprofits and local units of government. So
Oh.
if one of the cities in the county says, hey, we have this property, we need a phase 1 and a phase 2 done, we'll pay for that out of our, I think we've given the Housing Commission $1 million out of our LBRF.
so it's not, it wouldn't be legal for the city of Big Rapids to use, Traverse City's Brownfield Authority to do these things for us.
No, I don't think you could do that.
It's not legal. I mean, geez, we're reinventing the wheel and they're doing 17, he's doing 25, and here we are struggling to get.
So the alternative is you say, go to the county authority.
Right,
They don't do any either.
they don't know anything either.
We're,
And the difference is,
A lot more than,
so the difference is, it's then the county that has the LBRF, not you.
I see.
that's why, thought, well, we need to control our own destiny. We-
Yeah, and then here you go.
And it's their,
I know.
and it's their policies and procedures, not yours.
Yeah.
While it would come to your council to approve,
Oh, it does.
it has to. It has to go through the local authority, the local unit of government before it goes to the county board. So you, at the local level, you could kill it. Say, no, we don't like this project.
Trevor, kind of going back to the agenda, do you have a public hearing on these?
The meetings are public, but you don't actually have a public hearing at the Brownfield Authority level.
Okay.
The public hearing is at the city council.
Was it the city commission?
Yeah,
I
so,
love so.
so the Brownfield Authority recommends approval of a Brownfield plan
Okay,
to the local unit of government. The local unit of government has a notification, it's a 10-day notification, that has to be published. The way you publish all your,
Yeah.
so you're having a public hearing, people can come and talk about it. You also have to notify every taxing jurisdiction
yeah.
that you're going to be doing this, so like, if they're capturing school
ISD, school.
taxes, or police, county, whatever, all of those get a notification letter, hey, we're going to be doing this. They can come and talk about it, and they can come and say, we don't like it. They have no ability to refuse, to stop it. They can only state their opinion, they can't stop it.
We're only getting X number of dollars on that theater anyway, a low taxable amount. So theoretically, you don't lose anything while it's going on.
Right, and the other thing is,
No lose
the other
until,
thing you have to look at is what's the current taxable value of it and how much is it gonna increase? Cause it's really, it was a theater, it's gonna be a theater. There's probably not gonna be a lot of tax increment there to
that's what I'm
capture.
wondering.
So that's one of the evaluations you do is it even worth going through this whole process? If you're not gonna there's not gonna be much to capture. It makes sense on your housing one, it may not make sense on this one.
Theater.
So that's the evaluation you have to look at.
Oprah would, right? Cause he wouldn't have to pay taxes the first.
That's correct, and you can still do a brownfield with an Oprah, the tax increment just doesn't kick in until year 11 or the end of the
Like
Oprah.
at Christmas when you have the advent calendar and there's candy in there and you have to convince your kids not to open all the doors at once. So you just keep opening the door. You can just leave us at like maybe December 15th. Open. So we can just
And open the town.
glom on to it.
Active ones,
I don't think there's any active any.
I think they're all expired or awful close, are they?
Because there was,
What was the question? I missed it.
We have Oprahs in town. The Social Security building was an Oprah, the Pioneer building was an Oprah. The gate maybe was one at one time.
In that day, really? Was it the bowling alley?
The bowling alley was at one time. There was a handful of them.
something at the county level talking, that Gerber was talking to the county commission about something about the building there, they weren't getting some sort of money. I don't understand.
Social Security one?
Yeah,
That 5 years, they got a 5-year one.
okay.
And that 5 years expired maybe a couple years ago or something. So he probably was talking about how we no longer have this tax abatement. That'd be my guess. I didn't hear what the comments were, but they know, they pay the,
How would the theater guy, he's gonna put like maybe $1.2 million, he saw $1 million.
December 13th.
He wouldn't have,
So a lot of what he's putting into it is renovating, and that's not eligible.
It was only to,
projectors and sound
None of
system.
that's eligible.
Well, then why
Yeah, the
we
dry
may not
cleaner-
end up
yeah, the
doing
dry
it.
cleaner, right?
It was to try to help him with any environmental,
Cause of that dry cleaning paper or whatever?
yeah, that kind of stuff. That was the goal of
So
it.
if he needs to put in a vapor mitigation system, the thing is, it's gonna cost $10,000 to get through the brownfield process, to write a brownfield plan, get it through a review and get it through all this, right? And the statute allows for up to 10. If you're only gonna capture the cost of a vapor mitigation system that might be 15 to 20,000, it's probably not worth it to go through the brownfield.
We made,
Especially if you're doing an Oprah and you're not even gonna capture that for 10 years.
We're probably getting geared up for July on Edwin.
that'd probably,
You work with them already, you'll know what they're gonna ask, what they're gonna do with,
Generally, yeah.
I think you're right, Mayor.
I think that's what it's sounding like. We're gearing up for July.
We adjourn.
You had enough of?
Someone's got a motion for it, right? We're doing it the way we did.
And I just hit the thing and say adjourn.
I'll move to
Right when I'm talking.
It's too complicated.
So just double checking, I mean, our next one is June 24th, and then after that, July 22nd.
You think July 22nd, they'll have put something in or by then?
Well, that's when they talked about, that was their